There are some secrets that sit in the pit of your stomach, like a lead weight, heavy and suffocating, threatening to rupture not just your own peace, but the very fabric of the lives around you. This was one of those cases. A secret so profoundly unsettling it had been meticulously buried. Years of careful silence built around it until the sheer pressure became too much. When Amanda walked onto my stage, the weight of that secret was almost palpable. A visible aura of dread and resignation clinging to her like a shroud. You could see it in the way her shoulders were perpetually hunched, the way her eyes darted nervously, always scanning for an escape route that wasn't there. Amanda wasn't just carrying a secret. She was carrying the identity of a deceiver, a betrayer, though she would never use those words herself. She saw herself as a protector, a reluctant keeper of a truth that she believed would shatter her family. But the truth, as it so often does, had become a cage, and she was desperate to break free, even if it meant tearing down everything she thought she was protecting. The central problem wasn't merely the existence of the secret itself, though that was monumental, but the psychological toll it had taken on Amanda, the insidious way it had distorted her relationships, particularly with her sister Chloe, and how it threatened to redefine the entire family lineage. This wasn't a case about a simple misunderstanding or a forgotten debt. This was about the very foundation of identity, parentage, and trust, all intertwined with a betrayal that had festered for years. When I first met Amanda, her guardedness was striking. She presented as a woman worn down by an invisible battle, her voice soft, almost a whisper, as if years of self-censoring had conditioned her to speak only in hushed tones. Yet beneath that fragility, I could sense a fierce, almost desperate resolve. She wasn't coming to me for an easy fix. She was coming because she had exhausted every other option, every internal debate, every sleepless night. She carried labels, not just from herself, but from the invisible jury she imagined scrutinizing her. Liar, meddler, someone who kept vital information from a sister she claimed to love. Her initial impression on me was one of deep internal conflict. A woman caught between two impossibilities, living with the secret or living with the fallout of revealing it. She was, in essence, trapped in a psychological prison of her own making, yet built upon circumstances that were not entirely of her own choosing. I needed to understand the genesis of this burden, to trace the intricate emotional and circumstantial pathways that led her to this precipice. It wasn't enough to know what the secret was. I needed to know why it was born, how it had been sustained, and who else was implicitly or explicitly involved in its genesis. Amanda's story began not with a single event, but with a series of quiet, almost imperceptible shifts in her family dynamic, a slow erosion of boundaries and expectations that paved the way for something truly explosive. She spoke of her childhood, a seemingly idyllic picture marred by the underlying current of her parents' volatile marriage. Her father, a charismatic but deeply flawed man, and her mother, a woman who sought peace at any cost, often at the expense of honesty. This was the blueprint, the subtle psychological primer for the family's approach to difficult truths. Avoid, minimize, deny. Amanda, being the elder sister, had always felt a disproportionate sense of responsibility for Chloe, who was 4 years her junior. Chloe was the dreamer, the free spirit, often shielded from the harsher realities of their parents' discord by Amanda's quiet vigilance. This protective instinct, Amanda believed, was the root of her eventual complicity. She recalled a specific period, almost 15 years prior, a turbulent time for Chloe. Chloe, then in her early 20s, was in a tumultuous relationship with a man, Mark, who Amanda instinctively distrusted. He was charming, yes, but also manipulative, with a history of infidelity that Chloe, blinded by love, seemed unable or unwilling to see. Amanda had tried to warn her, subtly at first, then more directly, but Chloe had pushed back, accusing Amanda of jealousy, of trying to control her life. The rift between them had been painful, leaving Amanda feeling alienated and helpless. It was during this period, when Chloe and Mark were on a break, a euphemism, Amanda now recognized for Mark seeing other women, that the fateful event occurred. Amanda's parents, always keen to fix things and ensure family harmony, had decided to throw a small anniversary party, hoping to mend the fractured relationship between their daughters. Chloe, still raw from her breakup with Mark, had been drinking heavily. Amanda remembered the exact moment. A momentary lapse, a shared vulnerability, a desperate attempt to find comfort in the familiar arms of someone who understood her pain. In a blur of alcohol and emotional distress, something happened between Amanda and Mark. A colossal error in judgment, a monumental lapse of boundaries, driven by what Amanda now described as a twisted desire to prove Mark's true colors to Chloe, and perhaps a misguided attempt to fill a void in her own life. The details were hazy, fragmented by shame and the passage of time, but the core fact remained: she had slept with her sister's boyfriend. The immediate aftermath was a maelstrom of guilt and terror. Mark had dismissed it as a drunken mistake, a secret to be buried, something that never happened. Amanda, riddled with self-loathing, agreed. Her primary concern shifted from anger at Mark to an overwhelming fear of hurting Chloe. She saw Chloe's fragile emotional state, her deep devotion to Mark despite his flaws, and she couldn't bring herself to confess. The decision, born of fear and a distorted sense of protection, set the stage for years of silent suffering. Chloe and Mark eventually reconciled, their relationship seemingly stronger, and within a year, Chloe announced she was pregnant. The news of Chloe's pregnancy had hit Amanda like a tidal wave, a sickening lurch in the pit of her stomach. She remembered the exact moment Chloe shared the news, her face beaming with pure, unadulterated joy. Amanda had feigned excitement, forcing a smile, congratulating her sister, all the while a cold dread settling deep within her bones. The timing was too close, too precise for comfort. The timeline of Chloe and Mark's reconciliation, combined with the period of their break when Amanda and Mark had been together, created a terrifying overlap. Amanda's mind, already racing with guilt and anxiety, began to put pieces together, pieces she desperately wished she didn't possess. She started doing mental calculations, recalling the dates, the weeks, the brief window of time when she and Mark had crossed an unforgivable line. The terrifying realization solidified. There was a very real, very plausible chance that the baby Chloe was carrying was not Mark's. It could be hers, it could be their baby. This wasn't just a secret anymore. It was a living, breathing entity, a potential truth that could rip their family apart at the seams. Amanda, paralyzed by fear and a sense of responsibility she felt was crushing her, did what she had always done in moments of extreme stress and guilt. She retreated, internalized, and locked it away. She watched Chloe's pregnancy with a strange mix of love, dread, and a forensic eye, searching for any physical signs in the developing child that might confirm her worst fears. Every ultrasound image, every kick felt through Chloe's belly became a source of agonizing speculation. When the baby, a boy named Liam, was born, Amanda's anxiety reached fever pitch. She looked for resemblances, scrutinizing Liam's features, his temperament, comparing them to Mark, to herself, to her parents, searching for a definitive answer. But children are a beautiful, unpredictable mix, and no definitive answers emerged from her anxious observations. The secret, however, had a life of its own. It didn't just sit there dormant, it actively shaped Amanda's life and her relationship with Chloe and Liam. She found herself overcompensating, doting on Liam, trying to be the best aunt ever, perhaps as a form of penance or an attempt to nurture a child who might, in some terrifying alternate reality, be her own son. This excessive attention, however, started to create friction. Chloe, while appreciating Amanda's help, began to feel a subtle unease. Why was Amanda so involved? Why did she seem to overreact to every sniffle, every scraped knee? It felt, to Chloe, almost possessive, crossing the line from loving aunt to something more intense, more unsettling. The dynamic between the sisters grew strained, characterized by unspoken tensions and subtle resentments. Chloe would sometimes make sarcastic remarks about Amanda's mother hen tendencies or gently push her away when Amanda offered too much advice on parenting. The underlying issue wasn't just the secret, but the constant performance Amanda had to maintain. Every interaction with Chloe, with Mark, and especially with Liam was a carefully constructed facade. She lived in constant fear of discovery, of a slip of the tongue, of someone noticing a resemblance she hadn't, of a genetic test being ordered for an unrelated medical reason that might uncover the truth. This fear manifested in other ways. Amanda struggled to form lasting romantic relationships of her own. How could she, when such a monumental lie hung over her, a sword of Damocles threatening to fall at any moment? She couldn't imagine sharing this burden with a partner, nor could she bear the thought of starting a family of her own while this unresolved specter haunted her. Her life became a series of half-lived experiences, always with one foot held back, one part of her perpetually guarded. As Liam grew older, the resemblance, or lack thereof, became more pronounced to Amanda. Mark, always a somewhat distant father, seemed to become even more disengaged. He was often away for work, and when he was home, he spent little quality time with Liam. This too fed Amanda's anxieties. Was Mark unconsciously aware? Was his distance a subconscious rejection? Or was it simply his character? Amanda projected her own guilt and fear onto every observation, every nuanced interaction. She saw Liam's earnest eyes, his quiet thoughtfulness, and she saw pieces of herself, pieces of her family, not Mark's. The psychological burden became suffocating. She started having panic attacks, experiencing chronic insomnia, and withdrawing from social circles. Her physical health began to deteriorate, a direct manifestation of the immense psychological pressure she was under. The family's tendency to avoid confrontation and difficult truths only exacerbated the situation. When Chloe occasionally expressed frustration with Mark's parental detachment, Amanda would find herself advocating for Liam, sometimes even subtly blaming Mark, which Chloe would interpret as an attack on her marriage. This led to arguments, increasing the distance between the sisters. You always side with Liam against Mark, Chloe would accuse. It's like you think you're his mother. Each comment, each pointed look, each casual observation chipped away at Amanda's resolve, bringing her closer to the brink. The lie wasn't just a secret. It was an active force tearing apart the very relationships it was supposedly meant to protect. Amanda's attempts to protect Chloe from the truth had inadvertently created a web of resentment, suspicion, and emotional distance that was far more damaging than any initial shock might have been. The family was drowning in an ocean of unspoken truths, and Amanda was at the epicenter of the storm. The tension in the family, fueled by Amanda's hidden truth, began to escalate dramatically. It wasn't a sudden explosion, but a slow, suffocating burn that permeated every interaction, every shared silence. Chloe, increasingly frustrated with Mark's emotional distance and his sporadic involvement in Liam's life, started confiding in Amanda. She'd complain about Mark's late nights, his indifference to Liam's school events, his general detachment. Amanda, caught in a torturous bind, would listen, her heart aching for Chloe, but also for Liam, and for the impossible secret she carried. She couldn't validate Chloe's feelings about Mark without implicitly acknowledging the very question that haunted her. Is he truly Liam's father? Instead, Amanda would offer vague reassurances or try to mediate, which often came across as defending Mark, or worse, as dismissive of Chloe's very real pain. Maybe he's just stressed with work, Amanda would suggest, or boys can be difficult at that age. Chloe, he'll come around. These platitudes, born out of a desperate attempt to keep the secret buried, only served to infuriate Chloe. You never take my side, Amanda. Chloe would lash out, her voice laced with the bitterness of a sister who felt perpetually misunderstood and unsupported. It's always about Mark or Liam. Sometimes I just need you to be my sister, to understand my feelings. The accusation stung Amanda, cutting her to the core, because deep down, she knew Chloe was right. She couldn't be the sister Chloe needed because she was too busy being the keeper of a lie that dictated her every word and action. The blame shifting became a painful dance. Chloe blamed Mark for his perceived failures as a husband and father, and she blamed Amanda for not being a supportive sister. Amanda, in turn, silently blamed herself for the initial mistake, for perpetuating the lie, and for the growing chasm between her and Chloe. Mark, oblivious to the true nature of the family's dysfunction, often retreated further, exacerbating the cycle. He saw Chloe's frustrations as unreasonable, nagging, and Amanda's over-involvement with Liam as intrusive. He'd make sarcastic comments like, "Looks like Liam has two mothers. Chloe, you sure you want to share him?" These throwaway lines would send a jolt of terror through Amanda, making her physically recoil, while Chloe would just roll her eyes, seeing it as another example of Mark's insensitivity. The situation became unbearable when Liam started experiencing some behavioral issues at school. He was withdrawn, moody, and had difficulty concentrating. The school counselor suggested family therapy. This was the moment the pressure truly mounted. Chloe, desperate for answers, wanted everyone involved, herself, Mark, Amanda, even their parents. Amanda, of course, absolutely recoiled at the idea. The thought of sitting in a room under the scrutiny of a professional with the secret simmering beneath the surface was terrifying. She imagined the therapist with their trained eye, picking up on every nuance, every averted gaze, every pregnant pause. Amanda tried to dissuade Chloe, arguing that it was a private matter between Chloe, Mark, and Liam, and that involving other family members would only complicate things. "This is our family, Amanda," Chloe insisted, "and you're a part of it, especially for Liam. He loves you, and you're always there for him. We need you." Chloe's desperate plea was like a knife twist in Amanda's gut. The very bond that Amanda had cultivated with Liam, her desperate attempt at atonement, was now forcing her into a situation where the truth might be irrevocably exposed. The irony was devastating. The family arguments grew louder, more frequent, and more personal. During one particularly heated exchange, after a particularly frustrating session with Liam's school, Chloe, overwhelmed with stress and anger, blurted out, "You know, Amanda, sometimes I wonder why you're even in my life. You're always hovering, always judging Mark, always treating Liam like he's your child. What is your problem?" The accusation, so close to the truth, shattered Amanda's composure. She didn't respond, couldn't respond. She just stared at Chloe, tears welling in her eyes, the years of suppressed emotion threatening to erupt. She fled the room, leaving Chloe bewildered and even angrier. That confrontation, that direct accusation, was the tipping point. Amanda realized she couldn't continue living this way. The secret wasn't protecting anyone. It was actively destroying her relationship with Chloe, and subtly, insidiously affecting Liam. The fear of revelation was consuming her, but the fear of not revealing it, of letting this toxic lie continue to poison their lives, had finally become greater. She needed an intervention. She needed a way to bring this truth into the light, not just for herself, but for Chloe, for Liam, for the entire family. She reached out anonymously at first to my show, desperate for a path forward, knowing that the only way out was through. She was a woman teetering on the edge, about to jump, not knowing if she would land on solid ground or shatter into a million pieces. When Amanda sat on my stage, her face was a map of anguish, her body language screaming defensive retreat. Chloe sat next to her, bewildered and visibly frustrated, still unaware of the bombshell about to drop. I knew I had to tread carefully but decisively. This wasn't about drama. It was about truth, however painful. I started by addressing the palpable tension between them, the years of unspoken grievances that had led to this moment. Chloe, I began, my voice steady. You've described a sister who is over-involved, judgmental, and distant when you need her most. You feel like she's trying to parent your child. Chloe nodded vigorously, tears welling up. Exactly, Doctor. Phil, it's like she doesn't respect my role as a mother. She acts like Liam is hers to protect, not mine. I turned to Amanda, who was staring at her hands, her knuckles white. Amanda, you hear that? Your sister feels usurped. She feels judged. But there's something else, isn't there? Something driving this behavior that goes far beyond being an overzealous aunt. Amanda looked up, her eyes wide with fear. This was it, the moment of truth. I love Liam, she stammered, her voice barely audible. I just want what's best for him. We all want what's best for children, Amanda, I pressed, leaning in. But your behavior isn't just about love. It's about guilt. It's about fear. You're carrying a burden that is crushing you, and it's poisoning your relationship with the very people you're trying to protect. The audience was silent, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Chloe looked from me to Amanda, confusion clouding her features. What are you talking about? She asked, her voice trembling. I looked directly at Amanda. Tell her, Amanda, tell her why you've been so afraid. Tell her why you've been so involved with Liam. Amanda took a shaky breath, tears streaming down her face. She looked at Chloe, really looked at her, for the first time in years without the filter of her secret. Chloe, she whispered, I need to tell you something. Something I should have told you years ago. Chloe's expression shifted from confusion to dread. What is it? She demanded, her voice rising. What did you do? It's about Mark, Amanda said, her voice cracking, and it's about before you got back together. When you were on that break, a gasp rippled through the audience. Chloe went rigid. What about Mark? She asked, her voice dangerously quiet. We slept together, Amanda confessed, the words tumbling out in a rush. It was one night, we were both drunk and upset, and it just happened. I'm so sorry. Chloe stared at her, stunned into silence, her face drained of color. You and Mark? She whispered, disbelief warring with horror. My boyfriend? The father of my child? Yes, Amanda sobbed. But there's more, Chloe. There's a reason I've been so worried about Liam, a reason I've been so obsessive. Chloe's eyes widened, a dawning realization creeping into them. a horror too terrible to articulate. No, she breathed. No, Amanda, don't say it. I have to, Amanda cried. The timing. It was right before you got pregnant. I've been terrified for years that Liam might be mine. The silence that followed was absolute. It was as if the air had been sucked out of the room. Chloe looked as if she had been physically struck. She recoiled from Amanda as if she were contagious. You think Liam is your son? She choked out her voice, a mix of fury and devastation. And Marks, my husband and my sister? I don't know, Amanda wailed. I don't know for sure, but the possibility, it's haunted me every single day. Every time I look at him, I wonder. Every time I see you struggling with Mark, I feel responsible. I wanted to tell you, but I was so afraid of losing you, of destroying everything. You have destroyed everything, Chloe screamed, standing up, her body shaking with rage. You lied to me for years. You let me build a life, a family on a lie. You let me raise a child wondering if she couldn't finish the sentence, collapsing back into her chair, sobbing uncontrollably. I let the raw emotion hang in the air for a moment, acknowledging the gravity of the betrayal. Then I stepped in, my voice firm but compassionate. This is a lot to process, Chloe. It's a betrayal of the highest order. But right now, we need facts. We can't live in the what-ifs anymore. We need to know the truth about Liam's parentage. Not for you, not for Amanda, not even for Mark, but for Liam. He deserves to know who he is. I turned to Amanda. You've lived in a prison of your own making, Amanda, and you've dragged your sister into it without her consent. But today, we break the lock. We get the answers. And then, and only then, can we even begin to talk about healing. I signaled to the producers. We have the results of a DNA test, I announced. Mark agreed to provide a sample, as did Amanda and Liam. We are going to settle this question once and for all. Is Liam the biological son of Mark and Chloe? Or is he the biological son of Mark and Amanda? The tension in the studio was excruciating. Amanda was weeping silently, her head bowed. Chloe was staring at me, her eyes red and swollen, a mixture of fear and desperate hope on her face. I held the envelope in my hand, feeling the weight of the lives contained within it. This wasn't just a piece of paper. It was the key to their future, whatever that might look like. The results are conclusive, I stated. Opening the envelope, I scanned the document, absorbing the information that would change everything. I looked up, meeting Chloe's gaze, then Amanda's. When it comes to the paternity of Liam, I paused, letting the significance of the moment sink in. Mark is the biological father. A collective breath was released, but the tension remained. The real question, the one that had torn them apart, was about maternity. And when it comes to the maternity of Liam, I looked directly at Amanda. Amanda, you are not the biological mother. A sob broke from Chloe, loud and guttural, a release of tension so profound it shook her entire body. She covered her face with her hands, weeping with relief. Amanda, too, slumped in her chair, a fresh wave of tears streaming down her face. But these were different. They were tears of a burden lifted, of a nightmare ending, even if the scars remained. Liam is Chloe's biological son, I confirmed, my voice gentler now. There is no doubt. The timing was close, Amanda, perhaps terrifyingly so in your mind, but biology has spoken. Your fear was real, your guilt was real, but the reality you feared did not come to pass. The weight in the studio lifted palpably, but the air remained thick with the residue of betrayal. The DNA test had answered the biological question, but it hadn't erased the years of deception, the erosion of trust, or the emotional scars inflicted by Amanda's silence. Chloe was sobbing openly, a mix of relief and profound hurt. Amanda sat slumped, her face buried in her hands, the magnitude of what she had almost destroyed crashing down on her. "So Liam is mine." Chloe finally managed to choke out, wiping her eyes, "He's really mine," and Mark's. She looked at me, then at Amanda, her expression hardening. "But that doesn't change what you did, Amanda. It doesn't change the fact that you slept with my boyfriend. It doesn't change the fact that you kept this from me for years while playing the perfect aunt. You let me wonder. You let me doubt my own child." I nodded gravely. "You're absolutely right, Chloe. Biology is one thing, trust is another. And right now, trust is shattered. Amanda, you can't just expect forgiveness because the DNA test came back the way you hoped. You betrayed your sister in the most profound way possible. You violated the sanctity of her relationship, and then you compounded that betrayal with silence." Amanda looked up, her eyes red and swollen. "I know," she whispered. "I know I messed up. I know I can never take it back. I was so scared. I didn't want to hurt you, Chloe. I didn't want to lose you." "But you did hurt me," Chloe cried. "You hurt me more than if you had just told me the truth back then. We could have dealt with it. We could have moved on. Instead, you let it fester. You let it become this monster between us." I leaned forward. "This is where the real work begins. The DNA test was the easy part. Rebuilding a relationship after this level of deceit is going to take time, effort, and a willingness to be brutally honest with yourselves and each other. Amanda, you need to understand that your fear of conflict, your need to control the narrative, has caused immense damage. You need to learn how to communicate openly, honestly, and without manipulation." I turned to Chloe. "And Chloe, you have every right to be angry. You have every right to grieve the relationship you thought you had. But you also have a choice to make. Do you want to hold on to this anger forever? Or do you want to find a way to move forward? Not for Amanda, but for yourself and for Liam. Because he needs a mother who isn't consumed by bitterness." The road ahead was long and arduous. We spent hours dissecting the layers of dysfunction in their family dynamic, exploring the patterns of avoidance and denial that had allowed this secret to take root. We talked about boundaries, about healthy communication, about forgiveness not as a pardon, but as a release for the person doing the forgiving. It was raw, emotional work filled with tears, accusations, and moments of profound vulnerability. In the end, there was no magical reconciliation, no tearful embrace that erased the past. But there was a shift, a subtle yet significant movement towards healing. Chloe agreed to continue individual therapy to process her anger and betrayal. Amanda committed to intensive therapy to address her deep-seated guilt, her fear of abandonment, and her destructive patterns of secrecy. They both agreed to family counseling, starting with separate sessions and gradually moving towards joint ones, with the goal of rebuilding a relationship based on honesty and mutual respect rather than shared secrets and hidden resentments. As they left the stage, the distance between them was still palpable, but the wall of silence had been breached. The truth was out, ugly and painful as it was, and for the first time in years, they were facing it together. The secret that had threatened to destroy them had been dismantled, piece by piece, leaving behind the wreckage of the past but also the faint, hopeful glimmer of a future where honesty, however hard, was the only path forward. Months later, I received an update. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. The scars were still there, and trust was being rebuilt, slowly, painfully, one honest conversation at a time. But Liam was thriving, surrounded by a family that was learning, finally, to live in the truth. And for Amanda, the crushing weight was gone, replaced by the hard work of redemption, a journey she was now finally equipped to take.